Hi, everyone. This is Marc Zawel. I'm the co-founder of AcceptU. Want to welcome you all to our essay analysis for MIT Sloan. It's part of the Beat the GMAT Write Like an Expert series. I wanted to start just by mentioning that this presentation is available for download from our website. And you see up on your screen if you just go to http://learnmore.acceptu.com/MIT, you'll be able to download this presentation, which hopefully will allow you to listen versus take lots of notes and allow you at a later time to review what we're covering today. To start, I just wanted to give you some information on our counseling group, AcceptU. We are comprised entirely of former MBA admissions officers from top 25 programs. All of the counselors on our team have worked inside of admissions offices at top business schools here in the US, and our counselors work one-on-one exclusively by phone, Skype, and email. And our counselors have helped hundreds of applicants gain a competitive advantage and place them into the business schools of their choice. To give you just some additional background on myself, as well as my co-founder and our counselors, I'm the author of a top-selling admissions guidebook called Untangling the Ivy League. I did my undergrad at Cornell University, pursued an MBA at UNC Kenan-Flagler. My colleague, Stephen Friedfeld, has over 10 years of admissions experience, both undergraduate as well as graduate at Princeton University and at Cornell University. And as I mentioned before, all of the counselors on our team are former MBA admissions officers from top 25 programs. We think it's important that our counselors have that type of direct admissions experience so that they can really relay, based on that experience, how our clients can best position themselves in a way that will connect with admissions officers, help them stand out from other applicants, and ultimately improve their chances of getting accepted. So today, I wanted to start just by giving an overview of what we'll be covering. First, I want to discuss what your goal should be with the MIT Sloan application essays. I then want to talk a bit about how to strategically approach the writing process, the essay writing process. And here at AcceptU, we work with our clients on a pretty structured approach to the essay writing process, and I wanted to share some insights based on our experiences there. Then we're going to actually get right to the questions. There are 2 essay questions this year with MIT Sloan, as well as an optional essay. We'll provide an analysis of both of those required questions, and then talk a bit about the optional essay, which is kind of it's the optional essay with MIT Sloan, I think, might be a different type of optional essay than an optional essay you're writing for another business school. And then finally, we'll talk just at a high level about putting pen to paper and getting started with your MIT Sloan, as well as your other business school application essays. So let's start with why your MIT application essays are critical. And I want to start there because you have to put this all into context. Your essays really are just one piece to your application, but they are a critical piece to your application. And so let's talk a little bit about why they are so important. And in our discussion here, this is going to apply to MIT Sloan, but it will also apply to other top 25 business schools. Admissions officers, the goal of the application process is to learn more about you. They want to know who you are, they want to know where you're coming from, and by where you're coming from, I mean both professionally as well as personally. They want to know about your hobbies, your interests, your leadership potential. They want to know what you are going to be able to contribute to their class. They want to know what you are going to be able to contribute in your future career in terms of its potential. So if the goal of the application and the process itself is to learn more about you, really the essay is your primary means of giving your application a voice. And by voice, I mean your application is largely driven by data points. There is your undergraduate or perhaps your graduate GPA. There's your GMAT score. There's a resume. You're talking about what your professional experience has been. But there's really no way for an admissions officer to get a sense of who you are beyond just those data points. And so you can become someone to an admissions officer through that type of voice established in your essay. And a voice in your essay is going to allow you to better connect with an admissions officer who is reviewing your application. And a connection with an admissions officer who is reviewing your application, and by connection I mean an emotional connection with who you are and getting excited about you as an applicant, can really be a strong way for you to stand out from other applicants, especially when those applicants are similarly qualified as you are. Strong writing also is going to show thoughtfulness, it's going to show a level of analysis, it's going to show a certain ability to communicate. And these are obviously all skills and qualities that admissions officers are looking to identify in applicants. So, and these are also qualities and skills that admissions officers feel are critical for success, both in their business school as well as in future professional careers. What we know is that admission to schools like MIT is highly competitive, and the applicant pool to programs like Sloan is largely self-selecting. You do not apply to programs like Sloan unless you feel that at a minimum you have the academic qualifications. And academic qualifications are GPA and GMAT. If you feel that you have your academic qualifications under control, meaning they're within range of what the average incoming student looks like, then you apply to a school like Sloan. But most other applicants that are applying are going to have very similar academic qualifications. So admissions officers use the more qualitative pieces of the application, in particular the essays, but also the resume, the letters of recommendation, the interview if they're conducting one, in order to further sort applicants and to further get a better understanding of which of these academically qualified applicants they should admit. So bottom line is that the essays are your best and sometimes your only way of standing out from other similarly qualified applicants. And finally, the essays can help you address any weaknesses or extenuating circumstances. We'll talk a bit more about this when we discuss the optional essay, but whether it's a low GPA or low GMAT score, whether it's lack of a letter of recommendation from a direct supervisor, whether it's a gap in your work experience, you want to proactively explain and address any potential deficiencies or weaknesses in your application. If you do not own this story, meaning you don't tell the story the way that you want to tell it, admissions officers will draw their own conclusions. And when you're talking about schools like MIT Sloan that are admitting, say, 1 in 10 applicants, I hate to say that admissions officers are looking for reasons to reject applicants, but it is a highly, highly competitive school to gain admission to. And so if there are certain weaknesses in your application, of course they can be compensated for by strengths in others because admissions officers are looking at your application in a holistic way. But if you do not explain those deficiencies or you don't compensate adequately for them by strengths in others, then it is quite easy for admissions officers to simply look at you as an applicant and say, this is an applicant that's really not up to par with the other applicants that we're considering. So we've talked now about why the MIT application essays are such a critical component to your application. And now I want to spend a bit of time talking about how to strategically approach the writing process. And here at AcceptU and working with clients each year that are targeting these top 25 business schools, this will give you some insight into the approach that we take and the approach that we feel allows our clients to stand out in this highly competitive process. even before you, I'm sure all or most of you have now looked at least at the questions that are being asked of you this year by MIT Sloan, but I would strongly encourage you, even before sitting down to start brainstorming potential topics, to take a step back. This is a really critical and important first step to the essay writing process, because you need to assess where you are and why you're looking to go to business school. And this is important because it really does form the foundational piece to your overall application and the strategy that you're going to take around the positioning or the packaging of your prior experiences and accomplishments, as well as your future career interests. So sit down and think very seriously about why you want to pursue an MBA. Are you looking to change your career? Are you looking to accelerate your career? If you're looking to change your career, why are you looking to change your career? What are you looking to change your career to? What can you point to in your prior experiences, either professional or personal, that can back up why you are interested in changing careers? If you're interested in accelerating your career, why can't you accelerate your career without an MBA? These are some really tough questions to be asking of yourself, but ultimately in doing so, it's going to allow you to really strongly justify your interest in pursuing an MBA. And while it sounds obvious, admissions officers want to admit applicants that have a very sincere and strong interest in pursuing an MBA at this time. After you've thought more generally about your interest in pursuing an MBA, you want to think more about MIT in particular. What is it about Sloan that makes it so attractive to you? Now, many applicants will run off a list of generic reasons why they feel like a school like MIT Sloan is the right fit for them. But when you look at those reasons, you could say that those reasons could also be used for a school like Harvard Business School or a school like Wharton. So you want to look very specifically at the program and its strengths and what makes it unique among its peers, and then think about specifically why those differentiators for the school make that program so appealing to you. Think finally about how you'll be able to contribute. And admissions officers want to know how you're going to contribute, not just while you're a student on campus, but they're also going to be thinking about what you'll be able to contribute in your future career track. When you're thinking about your differentiators, you can draw certainly upon your professional work experience. That's a given. But we strongly encourage our clients to also consider their personal interests as a means of differentiation, because it's very likely that there are going to be other applicants to MIT Sloan that have very similar, if not identical, prior work experience as you have. Perhaps you're coming from consulting, perhaps you're coming from investment banking, perhaps you're coming from entrepreneurship. There are going to be many applicants that fall into those similar buckets. So think more about your personal interests, your hobbies, your extracurricular activities, any diversity of your background. And we'll talk a bit more about this in a slide or two. But your personal differentiators can be even stronger in that you are you and no one else is going to really be like you in terms of your personal experiences versus your professional. And also, admissions officers are more apt to connect with you on a personal level than they are with you professionally. If you're talking about in your prior work experience, say an increase in sales that came as the result of an initiative that you led, of course that's commendable. That's something that admissions officers will want to identify in you as an applicant. But if you can talk about personally something that you've overcome, a challenge that you've faced, they're going to feel much more of an emotional connection to you as an applicant. And that emotional connection is really important because admissions officers are people, they're human beings, they're making decisions on other human beings. And if they feel that type of emotional connection with you as an applicant, they're much more likely to advocate for you. And in turn, you're much more likely to get admitted to their program. Let's talk about a little bit more the differentiators. We feel that it's important to come up with a list of, say, 3 to 5 differentiators, and these can be a mix of both personal as well as professional differentiators. And they're going to form, as I mentioned before, the foundation of your MIT essays. So going a little bit deeper into this idea of building your differentiators, as I mentioned, they can and they should be both personal or professional. I've listed a few just to get the to kind of open up your eyes to some potential differentiators that you might want to consider. Leadership always is an area, and both leadership accomplishments as well as leadership potential that admissions officers are looking to identify in applicants. And we've worked with clients in the past who have said, well, I don't manage any others. I don't think I really have any leadership experience. And we say, well, really anyone can be a leader, because a leader is not just about managing others. It can be having others empower you to achieve certain results. So leadership can take a very broad definition, and I would encourage you to take that broad definition in order to demonstrate the type of leadership potential as well as leadership accomplishments that in turn will allow you to differentiate yourself from other applicants. Also think about communication. Probably the strongest way that you can demonstrate that you have strong communication skills is by having a particularly strong essay. It ties back into that first slide that we went through. Diversity is always a factor that admissions officers are considering. Your diversity can be based around geographic, where you live, your ethnicity, your socioeconomic background. Those are all areas that admissions officers want to get a better understanding of who you are and where you're coming from. Your differentiator professionally can be based on either your prior work experience or it can be based on your future career interests. So with your prior work experience, perhaps you have worked in a unique industry, or perhaps you've worked in a relatively unique functional role within that industry. Even if you're coming from, say, an overrepresented industry or an overrepresented function, perhaps the responsibilities that you've had and/or the accomplishments that you have been able to achieve during that time will allow you to stand out from other applicants. But if you are coming from an overrepresented industry or functional role, then think much more about your personal differentiators as a means of standing out. The other professional differentiator that you can draw upon is your future career interest, both short-term and long-term. Now, if you're interested in consulting or investment banking or finance, these are probably the most popular areas for graduates to pursue, then try to say that within those industries you have a particular interest. But if you're interested in, like, more generally management consulting, and there's nothing wrong with that, it's going to be pretty difficult for you to use that as a differentiator. So I would encourage you to consider perhaps some of these other ways for you to stand out from other applicants. A good way for you to start thinking critically about this is by talking with others. It can be difficult for you to think about yourself in this way. You want to talk to others and say, I'm trying to think about what makes me different. You can look back at your old performance reviews or evaluations from your either current or a previous employer. You can talk to old mentors or advisors that have known you over an extended period of time. I'd recommend that you not talk to your parents or a spouse or a boyfriend or girlfriend. They're probably only going to have great things to say about you, so you do want to try to find less biased sources in order to really approach this in a way that is effective in building this list of 3 to 5 differentiators. Now, what is MIT looking for in its applicants? And we've talked now, we're kind of going through this essay writing process. You've thought about what makes you different. Now we're going to try to match that or align that with what MIT Sloan is looking for. And if you go through this list, this was taken right from MIT Sloan's website. They're pretty open and transparent about what they are looking to identify in applicants. They're looking for high academic potential. They're looking for personal achievement. They're looking for self-motivation, and they're looking for leadership. So high academic potential is going to be expressed in your GMAT and in your GPA. So really, it's not applicable to your essays unless perhaps you've taken additional coursework, and that's going to be something that's discussed in an optional essay. But personal achievement, motivation, leadership, of course, these are all really important qualities that they are looking to identify, and these are, in turn, some of the differentiators that you want to highlight to them. MIT Sloan is somewhat unique also in that they say that they're as interested in your path to the accomplishment as they are in the results that you attained. They're looking to better understand the effect that you've had on people and what you've with who you've engaged with, and also the influence that you've had. So MIT Sloan is somewhat unique in that it's much less so about the accomplishment itself, and much more so how you have gotten to that accomplishment and how you have achieved that accomplishment. Because they feel very strongly that your prior thought process is a strong indicator and predictor of your future performance. They think that what you have done in the past is going to dictate what you do in the future. And not just what you've been able to achieve, but how you have approached problems, how you have achieved the accomplishments that you are outlining to them. That quotation from Sloan is very insightful when you start to think about what they are looking for in applicants, and ultimately how you're going to be incorporating all of this into your application essays. So I mentioned this just very briefly, but through this essay writing process, you have now identified your strengths, your qualities that you feel help you stand out. You've highlighted some of the experiences that you feel are going to be differentiators. And we've now discussed what MIT is looking for in its applicants. So you now have really the two critical pieces. You know who you are, what makes you different, and you know what admissions officers are looking for in applicants. So now it's time to get this matched up and aligned so that you can say what you want to say, but you don't want to say what you think they want you to say. And that's kind of the last thing I want to talk about on this slide, is that there has to be a certain level of authenticity with your application essays. Time and time again, you see application essays that just do not look or sound real. I think that while it can be somewhat helpful to review essays that have been written by other applicants who have perhaps been accepted to top schools like Sloan, certainly trying to mimic in any way these essays is only going to be detrimental in support of your application. The problem with these sample essays is really twofold. The first is that, one, you have no idea what other factors were taken into consideration with that particular applicant. They weren't, while the essays are certainly important, they likely were not admitted on their essay alone. So you need to kind of take all of this into context. And two, be careful about relying too heavily on how other essays sound or the topics that they cover, because you, in many ways, can come across as a phony or a fake. And there's nothing worse than an essay that doesn't sound like a real applicant. It goes back to what we were discussing earlier, and the reality is that admissions officers are people, they're human beings, and they crave connection with applicants. And if you are coming across as inauthentic in your application essays, and by inauthentic I mean contrived or fake or writing what you feel admissions officers are looking for versus who you actually are, that's the easiest ticket to a rejection letter. You have to think that admissions officers are also trying to identify applicants and future students that they would want to personally interact with. These are higher education professionals that live and, well, they don't live, but they work. During the high season, they essentially live on campus working. And so having a certain interaction with their current students is a big part of their job. And they want to admit applicants that they want to be around. And they also want to admit applicants that they feel are going to actively contribute to the campus community. This is a really important piece as well, because as I'm sure you're aware, if you have visited a school like Sloan or any of the other top business schools, they are very active and vibrant communities, and they are alive, and there is a lot of student participation, both in extracurricular activities and after-school clubs, and personal interest groups. These type of vibrant communities is something that admissions officers are looking to build in reviewing applicants. So you need to come across in a really authentic way, and the best way for you to do that is just to write based on who you are, not by relying on perhaps what others have written in order to get admitted to a school like Sloan or any of the other top MBA programs. So we've now talked about why the MIT application essays are critical. We've also talked about how to strategically approach the writing process by thinking about what makes you unique and different, and also trying to tie this into what admissions officers are looking to identify in applicants. Now let's spend a bulk of our time here thinking specifically and really analyzing the two MIT Sloan essay questions as well as the optional essay, which we feel for MIT Sloan is not really an optional essay. It's a third required essay, although it's being disguised as an optional essay, but we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. So I want to start, again, I'm not sure if all of you have sat down and reviewed the essay questions, excuse me, but just so that we're all on the same page, and I'll just read them and talk a little bit about the instructions, and then with the three essays, essay 1, essay 2, and then the optional essay, we'll break down those further. So it says here, we're interested in learning more about how you work, think, and act. For each essay, please provide a brief overview of the situation, followed by a detailed description of your response. Limit the experiences you discuss to those which have occurred in the past 3 years. In each of the essays, please describe in detail what you thought, felt, said, and did. So those are the instructions, and the instructions are almost as important as the essay questions themselves. And I've gone in and placed some emphasis on keywords and phrases that I thought were important to highlight to you. The first ties back into what we discussed earlier with what MIT is looking for in terms of future experience and future potential being tied into your prior experience, but especially when it comes to the thought process around it. So in each of these subsequent essays, you really want to provide as brief of an overview of the situation as possible. Do not get bogged down in explaining, in establishing the situation. You really want to spend the bulk of your time with these essays in a very kind of detailed analysis and description of how you responded to the various scenarios that they're looking to gain a better understanding of. And we've seen that time and time again, is that essays, especially essays that are like MIT Sloan's 500 words, which is essentially one page, you need to really cut to the chase. You cannot spend half your essay establishing the situation. It is a complete waste of time, and every single one of those 500 words, you need to really hope that you're getting a return on that use of that word, because your space here is so limited. And as we've discussed earlier, these essays are so critical. The second component to the instructions that I want to emphasize and point out is that you need to limit your experiences that you're highlighting to those that have occurred in the past 3 years. That is a direct instruction from the admissions office. I would encourage you to follow that to a T. You really don't want to bend this around and say, well, it happened 3.5 years ago, but it was really important. Well, play by the rules. Follow the instructions. Part of the process of applying to business school is getting a sense of whether you do follow instructions well. So if they're asking you to keep the experiences within the last 3 years, keep them within the last 3 years. The reason behind this, again, ties back into what we discussed earlier. They see your prior work experience and the ways in which you have approached problems and situations and challenges as the best indicator of how you will act and address questions and similar problems and challenges while you're a student at Sloan and in your future career. So you really can't emphasize enough the importance of keeping it to the past 3 years. And then finally, that last sentence is quite important as well. Thought, felt, said, and did. There's a reason that it just doesn't say, in each of the essays, please describe in detail how you responded. They're asking you for your thought process, your emotional response, how you've responded, how you acted. It's asking you for descriptive details, emotional details here. And again, it's about trying to get a better understanding of who you are as a person and trying to highlight some of these responses that you've had, some accomplishments that you've been able to achieve, and the ways in which you've approached challenges. So those are the instructions for the essays. And I did want to spend some time, because if you don't follow the instructions, you're really going to be setting yourself up for a really difficult time in this process. You're talking about thousands of applicants. So like I said before, they're not looking for a way of really rejecting you, but if you're not following the rules like you should be, it is a pretty easy way for you just to get your application kind of set aside. So let's talk now specifically about Essay 1. The mission of MIT Sloan School of Management is to develop principled, innovative leaders who improve the world and generate ideas that advance management practice. Discuss how you will contribute toward advancing the mission based on examples of past work and activities. Now, when you compare MIT Sloan's essays to those of other business schools, they're actually quite different. In the past, MIT had required its cover letter. I was about to say its infamous cover letter, but it was a well-known essay in the business school admissions world. Now, that has been eliminated this year, and the prompt that I just read to you has taken its place. Now, this is not your standard why MBA or goals essay, and if you've started this process, and if you're in the midst of writing essays, you know what these why MBA or goals essays are about. This is not one of them. I mean, you can say in some ways it is, but this is not you taking another school's why MBA or goals essay and trying to play around with it enough so that it kind of fits in to this prompt, because this prompt is quite different in what it's actually prompting you to discuss. Again, emphasizing the past experiences are indicative of your future behavior. But when you sit down and you break out the two sentences of this prompt, there are a couple of keys that I wanted to highlight for you. The first is their use of the adjective principled. They want to develop principled, innovative leaders. Principled and innovative, those are really the two key words in this prompt. What does principled actually mean? And this goes back into what we were discussing earlier, is that unless you know what they're looking for, you cannot position your accomplishments or your experiences or your differentiators in a way that's going to connect. And admissions officers are trying to assess this fit. They want to see, do you fit with the program? So they're making it quite clear right now about who they are looking for and the type of applicant they are looking to admit by using these terms, principled and innovative. Now, principled for us means moral or ethical or thoughtful. Those are synonyms that we would use in place of that. And it's important to be thinking about these types of terms because in the business school world today, there is a lot of discussion around ethical values and moral values. And while you're not being directly prompted here to talk about, say, an ethical challenge that you overcame, which is a prompt for some of their business schools, they are asking you to think about how you have acted in ethical or moral, or at least at a minimum, thoughtful ways in the past as indicative of how you will act in the future. The other term that I wanted to highlight for you is innovative. And innovative is important similarly for a school like MIT, given its strong recognition as one of the top entrepreneurial programs in the country and the technology that's being produced by that particular school. So when it comes to being innovative, it's not necessarily inventing something. It's not necessarily being involved in a startup, but they are looking for leaders that have thought outside the box. They are looking for those that have taken, say, the road less traveled, those that have taken kind of a unique approach. Think about when everyone goes in one direction and there's a lot of pressure on you to follow the herd and go with that mentality, and you decide to go in an entirely different direction. That's what they're thinking about with innovative leaders. So you kind of have a sense now, all right, this is what they're looking for. You also have your differentiators and some of your experiences. Now you want to get down to what the matter at hand, which is finding these 2 or at most 3 examples and being brief with establishing the situation. As I said before, you don't want to spend too much time setting up the situation. You want to focus much more on explaining your thought process. You want to talk about, well, you have to establish what you were looking to achieve. Think about some of the challenges associated with the process, whether it was a goal professionally, whether it was a personal goal. This is this next piece is really important, and it's how and why did you approach it in a principled and innovative way. This, again, ties back into them trying to think about your thought process. As I said before, if everyone in your organization, whether that was professional or personal, was going in one direction and you decided to go in another direction, why did you do that? What made you go in that opposite direction? If you're thinking more about principled, why did you go? Why did you take the approach that you did, as opposed to the approach that everyone was taking? You don't need to be the lone wolf. You don't need to be that one rogue employee, but that's really going to give them a lot of insight into why you think the way that you think, and also a certain level of risk too. When you're going in one direction and everyone else is going in another direction, it's showing something to them, assuming, of course, that you were successful. I hope you were. Tie it in finally to how and why this type of experience and utilizing this example will in turn enable you to contribute. What is it about this experience that is going to be either transferable or relatable to your experience as a student at Sloan, as well as in your future career? If the examples that you're drawing upon don't make that type of direct connection, then you probably should not be using them as an example, because at the end of the day, these examples need to help them understand what they mean to you and why they were important and how they're going to allow you to contribute in the future. And the more specific that you can be about the contribution, the better. We strongly encourage our clients whenever possible to visit the programs that they're interested in. At a minimum, contact the admissions office to see if they can speak with a current student. Perhaps there's an admissions ambassador. If they have an opportunity to meet while with the admissions office is on the road in the fall in their local city, certainly that's something you'll want to do. If you have an opportunity to talk to, say, alumni of the program that live in your city, all these demonstrations of interest are really important, but they're also going to allow you to really gain an insight into why these programs and why this school, MIT in particular, is a good fit for you. And then in this essay, you could draw on some of this. You could say, based on my conversations with this particular student, I feel like this experience is going to allow me to contribute to this organization or to this club, or I feel like this class would be of particular interest to me. You kind of take it to that next step. You're going beyond just looking at the school's website like every other applicant and saying, I want to be president of this club, or I think that this study abroad program is fantastic. Take it to the next level if you want to be the 1 in 10 that is admitted to a program as competitive as Sloan. Keep in mind when you're putting together this essay that it's all about the process. Remember that thought, felt, said, and did, much more than the achievement itself. So don't get bogged down in discussing the achievement, or don't think the achievement has to be something monumental. It is much more about how you achieved what you achieved, thinking about this idea of principled and innovative leadership. The examples can be either personal or they can be professional. You don't want these examples to be from more than 3 years ago. Remember that. And then finally, they need to, if possible, be supportive of your future career goals. It doesn't always work out so perfectly in terms of the examples also allowing you to talk about what you are interested in pursuing, but if you can, it can be very beneficial. Help admissions officers connect the dots and see how an MBA from Sloan is going to help you achieve those goals, but also how you will be able to contribute based on these examples or experiences that you're drawing upon. So that's essay 1. Let's now jump to essay 2. I also want to be mindful, of course, of the time, because I'm sure that there's lots of questions, and certainly want to set aside as much time as we can at the end of this session. So we'll talk a little bit about essay 2, similarly as we did with essay 1. We'll talk about the optional essay, and then we'll get to your questions. So essay 2, describe a time when you pushed yourself beyond your comfort zone. Like essay 1, it's 500 words or fewer. It's limited to 1 page. We feel that with this essay, as with the other essay, but in particular with this essay, details are really important. Remember that thought, said, did. You can be creative with your essays. you do want to be creative. This is not an essay that you're using it for business purposes. This is not technical business writing. This is an essay for an application to business school, but it does not in any ways limit the amount of creativity that you can put into it. So try to think about details and sensory details and emotional details that you can add to this essay. Or if you can incorporate into the first essay, that's great. And if you could do both, then all the better. With an essay like this, pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone, let's try to, as we did with innovative and principled leaders, try to break down what this means. What does beyond your comfort zone actually mean? For us, it's something that's new. It can be overwhelming. It can be something that was unusual or unique. It can be a challenge. It can be something that was outside of your traditional responsibilities. You can really think broadly about this type of essay, because it can be either something that occurred to you professionally, or it can be something that personally has been something that you have addressed or overcome. And even when you're thinking about this type of essay, the accomplishment doesn't necessarily need to be a positive one. And what I mean by that is it can be a time that you were not necessarily successful. And when we talk about this with our clients, they kind of hear them gasp, because why would you ever want to talk about a weakness in your application essay? And the reality is that weaknesses in some ways can show admissions officers that you are human and real. And as long as you have learned from the weakness, it does not matter that you are addressing it in the way that you are. And I think it can also show a certain level of maturity that you are being upfront about it. But if you can talk about an accomplishment, meaning the time that you pushed yourself outside of your comfort zone and you were able to successfully achieve a goal because of that, all the better. But when you're thinking about this topic, it doesn't necessarily need to be something that you were successful with, because admissions officers are looking at how you went about approaching that and what you learned through this experience. There's a lot of different ways that you can structure an essay like this. We like to approach it with STAR. And by STAR, if you're not familiar with it, it kind of gives you a good framework to build an essay like this. Start by talking about the situation. As we've discussed, this is going to be brief. If you're writing a 500-word essay, this is not going to be more than like 100 words, because you only have another 400 words to convey how you addressed it, what you learned, how you're going to be able to contribute, how this is going to be applicable to your future career goals. So keep it short. You do want to talk about what you were responsible for. That's the task component, the T. The next is the action, and that's probably the most important part of this, because it ties back into helping admissions officers understand why you acted in the way that you acted, why you made the decisions that you made, what was your thought process behind all of this. And then the R is the result. And as I said before, the result is important, but I would not build an essay around the result. I would think much more about what example can I draw upon that's going to show how I thought through this process, as opposed to what I was able to achieve. And that's reiterated in that next bullet. With action, make sure that you highlight what pushed you outside of your comfort zone. Make sure that you're answering the question. Why did you do it in the way that you did? And how did this ultimately impact the result? Because hopefully the way in which you acted should have, in some ways, created a different result than if you had acted in a different way. And again, this ties back into the previous question where it's talking about thinking outside of the box and a certain level of innovation and thoughtfulness. And I think that you're seeing some similar themes, not surprisingly, given that it is MIT Sloan in this particular essay. With that last piece to the essay, the result, it's not just about what you learned, but you need to then tie it in to how this will be applicable in the future. It's great if you learn something, but it's not necessarily great if you learn something that isn't going to help you at all as a student at MIT or in your future career. So connect it. Draw the parallel between what you've been able to learn through this process and how this is going to be something that is applicable and relatable to your time as a student and then also in your future career. The last essay that we're going to discuss is the optional essay. And the optional essay is optional. If it says optional, it is optional, and it's your choice to whether you decide you want to write it or design it or say it. And we'll talk a little bit more about the various formats, or not. Typically, as I said before, the optional essay is reserved for extenuating circumstances, academic performance, analytical, quantitative skills, gaps in your work experience, if you don't have a letter of recommendation from your direct supervisor. But given the limitations with the required essay in the essays for Sloan, you should consider using this optional essay as a means of rounding out your essays. Certainly don't just rehash other parts of your essays and reiterate examples or differentiators or qualities that you've already talked about. But do go back to that initial list of differentiators that you developed. Think about how you can further build this fit with Sloan. You know kind of what makes Sloan unique. You know what makes you unique. If you haven't had a chance to talk about other pieces to your application, certainly highlight those experiences, always connecting them to your contributions, always connecting them to your future career interests. So with the optional essay, you also want to look at essay 1 and essay 2 and see how heavily you've drawn upon either your professional or your personal experiences. If you have only written about your professional experiences, then an optional essay is a good time to draw in and pull in some personal experiences, and vice versa. If you feel like they're pretty evenly split, then you have some more wiggle room and options with this particular essay. You can also consider various formats for this essay. It does not necessarily need to be a written essay. If it is a written essay, certainly keep it to the same length as the other essays that you're writing, and that's 500 words or 1 page. But you might also consider things like a PowerPoint presentation. You might want to consider a YouTube video. Be creative if you want, but always stay professional in how you are presenting yourself, and always stay on message. Remember, packaging or the positioning of your application, it needs to be consistent throughout. So stay on point and on message, and don't get distracted with a personal essay, because it is also likely going to be the last essay that they view or read. And so they're going to read essay 1, essay 2, and then potentially your optional essay. So make sure that that final essay that they read leaves them with a really positive feeling about you as an applicant. So I just want to wrap up with some final tips on getting started. These are just some high-level tips that you need to constantly keep in mind. 1, follow instructions. 2, make sure that you're answering the question. After you've written your essays, take a step back and say, did I actually answer this question? You want to be as direct as you can. You want to get to the point. You want to be engaging. You can be creative. Do not hold back, but only to a certain extent. Can't emphasize enough the importance of examples to showcase who you are, especially for a school like MIT Sloan. And then finally, don't forget to proofread. It's amazing the number of essays that come in each year with spelling mistakes and grammatical mistakes, and it happens, and you're not going to get rejected for it, but definitely give it a quick look through, or more than a quick look through. Perhaps let others give you some feedback on your essay, so that you can ensure that you're putting your best foot forward. So with that, it's always good to wrap up and take step back and see what we actually talked about today. But we discussed your goal with the essays from MIT Sloan, how to strategically approach the process, analysis of both essay questions as well as the optional essay, and then some final tips on putting pen to paper and getting started. And the presentation did run a little bit longer than I had hoped, but we do have a couple of minutes here, and I'm happy to take any questions that you'd like for me to address. But I'll also mention that we are going to continue answering your questions on Beat the GMAT at a chat party. So if you don't have an opportunity to have your question answered, I'd encourage you to come join us there, and we can have you ask those questions and hopefully get them answered. So with that said, we've got a couple of minutes, so let's just get right to some of these questions. Does providing a brief overview mean we should necessarily start with essays with a separate section with summary, or use the first paragraph as a summary of the following paragraphs? I would like to see you incorporate it into the essay as opposed to simply having your overview stand alone. I think that that might be a little bit too technical, and that might be too close of a reading of the instructions. I would try to incorporate this into your broader essay. The second question is about recommenders. While I did want to try to keep some of these questions primarily around the essays, I will talk very briefly about letter of recommendation writers. And I'll just, before I do that, I want to go to also this last slide because I know we had some late attendees, and I wanted to make sure that all of you who are here today have an opportunity to download this presentation, especially if you arrived late, and you can see learnmore.acceptu.com/MIT to download the presentation. And then also for all of you who are here today, and for those of you who might be viewing this as a recording in the future, our team here, we provide a complimentary admissions assessment. So we'll be able to provide you with feedback on your candidacy, strengths, weaknesses, how to improve your overall competitiveness. And you can sign up for that for that assessment on our website, learnmore.acceptu.com/webinar. And we've got maybe time for one last question. And again, I apologize that we didn't have a chance to go to more of them, and we will continue answering your questions at the chat party on Beat the GMAT as soon as this presentation concludes. The last question is, with regards to the application process as a whole, can you comment on the benefits of applying first round versus second round? If you will have a higher quality essay applying second round, is it okay to apply second round? Of course. There is a benefit to applying early, but you should only be applying in the round in which you feel you can put your best foot forward. If you feel that the second round is when you will be able to do so, then by all means you should hold off on applying until the second round. If you feel that you can put your best foot forward with your application, and by application I mean GMAT, essays, letters of recommendation, the whole package in the first round, then obviously get it in the first round. But I would discourage you from trying to apply in an earlier round if you do not feel that you can be putting your best foot forward with your application package, because you only get one shot at it. With that said, it looks like we are out of time, but I wanted to thank you all again. This has been the MIT Sloan Essay Analysis for 2013-2014. My name is Marc Zawel. I'm the co-founder of the AcceptU, and we look forward to having you join a future webinar presentation here with our friends at Beat the GMAT.